Welcome to the Geek Saga Podcast series, Hot D Takes, covering HBO's House of the Dragon, episode by episode. Hi, I'm Tara Lynn of Geek Saga Entertainment, and welcome to Hot D Takes. This podcast series covers HBO's House of the Dragon episode by episode with myself, an avid reader of all things Aesop, and my friend Manny, a Game of Thrones fan who is unsullied, aka has never read the books, being your stalwart hosts. So first things first, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at A Geek Saga.
And I'm Manny, the aforementioned unsullied co-host, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Manissimo Art. Thanks for joining us for our sixth episode, which will cover episode 6 of House of the Dragon, The Princess and the Queen.
As a reminder, expect spoilers from the episode we're covering. But less obvious, there will be very minimal book spoilers from Fire and Blood, only through the episode we're covering, which is, of course, the source material for House of the Dragon. We will start with an episode summary and then cover what we think are the main hot takes from the episode and conclude with an episode-specific favorites roundup.
We also have a rating system that we will, like true Targaryens, fill in when and where we please, and that system includes rating things on a scale of 1 to 10 Targ eyebrows.
Last but not least, each week we're joined by a special guest. This week it's Amanda, a fellow Aesop and Game of Thrones fan who hasn't read all of Fire and Blood, but has read the story The Princess and the Queen, which is kind of all that matters for this episode, am I right? Amanda, where can everyone find you on social media?
So I am Mystica on Instagram. I have a Bookstagram branching out in Jax, and then I'm on Twitter as Caprica.
Super excited to have you join us. Now, just one last piece of business before we dig in. Don't forget the Geek Saga Entertainment now has a Patreon with 10 tiers ranging from $1 a month to $40 a month. It offers tons of ways to support us and receive some great perks in return, including early access to these Hot D Takes podcast episodes. You can check it out at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment.
And now it's time for the long and the short of it, our weekly episode summary.
It's been 10 whole years since Rhaenyra and Laenor's shotgun wedding last week, and the mid-season point actually brings us right back to the beginning of it all. In one way, at least, as The Princess and the Queen kicks off with Rhaenyra giving birth. Thankfully, this birth scene ends much happier than the one in the season premiere, thank God, with Rhaenyra giving birth to a healthy baby boy. Not that she has time to rejoice and rest, because Alicent demands to see the child immediately, a request that Rhaenyra obliges herself, pausing only to deliver the afterbirth and put on a gown before trudging across the Red Keep with her newborn babe. Thankfully, Laenor is there to help her along the way, though he is vocal about how absurd the whole thing is, particularly when Rhaenyra has to pause to breathe through her pain. They eventually make it to Alicent's quarters, where Kristen, our very own Sir Cole of House Slaw, is guarding the door, and once inside, Rhaenyra is granted a seat for the resting Alicent insists she should be doing. The snide marks and looks that pass between these two throughout this and future scenes in this episode do everything to convince anyone who hears and sees them that things between the princess and the queen have deteriorated past repair. It was like watching two Southern women bless your hearting each other every time they're forced to be in the same room. Granted, Alicent's snarky comments aren't for Rhaenyra alone. After Viserys coos over his new grandson and Laenor announces that the boy will be named Joffrey, they are finally given permission to leave, but not before Alicent whispers to Laenor, "Do keep trying. Sooner or later you might get one that looks like you." Because, oh yeah, the baby has brown hair and two older brothers who also have brown hair.
While Rhaenyra isn't too happy with Laenor over his announcing the baby's name without, talking to her about it first, once back in their own chambers, things seem a little happier. The older boys have brought a dragon's egg for their new sibling, and Laenor herds them off to visit the dragon pit while Sir Harwin Strong, commander of the City Watch and obviously Rhaenyra's paramour, gets to hold his new son. Because even though we never see Rhaenyra and Harwin truly alone together or in any sort of embrace, they are definitely a thing. And everyone seems to know it. Although Viserys, if he does suspect, wants nothing to do with a scenario like this or the discussion surrounding it, and pretty much tells Alicent, who literally won't shut up about it, to shut up. This, of course, leads to Alicent venting to the one person she knows will listen and agree. And we'll give you 3 guesses as to who that is, but of course it's Kristen, aka Sir Cole of House Slaw. Because if he couldn't have Rhaenyra, obviously that means she's just the worst, right? Now, despite their mother's obvious enmity, at first it seems as if their sons get along okay. Or at least Alicent's oldest, Aegon, is comfortable enough with Rhaenyra's sons, Jace and Luke, for the 3 of them to play a prank on Aegon's younger brother, Aemond, who doesn't yet have a dragon of his own. They gift him with the pink dread, a pig wearing a makeshift dragon costume, and Aemond is none too happy and runs to complain to his mother, who steps away from creepy crawlers time with her daughter Helena to run off and confirm that, of course, it was Jason Luke who put Aegon up to the prank, right? Now, in terms of disturbing things that happened in this episode, the scene where Aegon is, well, standing in his window, which is God knows how many stories up and, of course, wide open, and jerking off is bad enough. But then Alicent catches him in the act and proceeds to guide him into admitting that, why, of course, he was just going along with Jason Luke's prank before she shakes him and yells some quote unquote sense into him regarding being nicer to his annoying little brother and how he, meaning Aegon, is the actual successor to the throne, no matter what Rhaenyra believes. Seriously, someone in that scene needs to take a chill pill, and that person's name begins with A and ends with listen. On top of that, the next time the kiddos get together, it seems as if a shift has already taken place. Sir Cole of House Slaw is supposed to be training all of them together, but he clearly favors Alicent's son and helps egg Aegon and Jace into a fight. Jace holds his own for a bit, but Aegon is older and larger and has obviously benefited more from Kristen's training. Eventually, Harwin steps in to break things up, leading to taunts from Kristen regarding Rhaenyra's son's parentage, and a real big boy fight ensues, with Harwin quickly gaining the upper hand and having to be pulled away. When Rhaenyra hears about the scuffle, she runs off to check on Harwin, only to overhear his father Lyonel, who also happens to be the hand of the king, berating Harwin for his affair with her. She returns to her chambers, and very soon, Laenor stumbles in drunk with his newest friend, who is a boy, and begins talking about how he wants to run off to Essos and fight in some war or another. Rhaenyra chastises him for even thinking about leaving so soon after their son was born and demands that he stays in King's Landing. Though she soon sort of changes her tune after a tense small council meeting in which she proposes that they settle the strife between her family and that of her father and Alicent by betrothing Jace to Helena.
That discussion is cut short, however, when Rhaenyra's breasts begin leaking. And although Viserys is totally into marrying his daughter to his grandson, Alicent basically tells him, "over my dead body," which is pretty brazen of her. But this conversation is also cut short, this time by Lionel Strong arriving to give his resignation as a Hand of the King in the wake of Harwin disgracing their family name by laying hands on Aegon and then beating up a member of the King's Guard. Viserys refuses to let him resign, but allows that he might take Harwin back to their seat at Harrenhal. Also, Rhaenyra loses her lover. Her sons lose the one of the 2 father figures who is actually their father, and she decides she's had enough and they should all go hang out on Dragonstone for a while. She even lets Laenor bring a +1. But hey, what has our badass whole Prince Daemon been getting up to in the past decade? Well, turns out he married Laena, which, after all, that Alicent stuff is somehow one of the less disturbing things in this episode. They've been traveling around some and have ended up in Pentos, where they show off their dragons. The Windy Boy and none other than Vagar, and their twin daughters, and are offered a place in Pentos in exchange for them, and their dragons, of course, aiding Pentos in case there's a war. Daemon is considering the alliance, but Lena says no way because she wants to go home to Westeros. Unfortunately, she never gets the chance because she is actually pregnant again, and unlike Rhaenyra, her situation goes the way of Queen Aemma in episode 1. Daemon is given the option of having the baby cut out of her, an idea he actually doesn't seem too fond of. Lena is having none of any of that. Anyway, she wants to die a dragon rider's death, and so she does, by stumbling outside to offer herself to Vagar, screaming Dracarys. at her dragon until Vagar obliges and burns her alive. And speaking of burning people alive, it turns out that a conversation between Alicent and Larry Strong led to him thinking, hey, if I murder my father, the Hand of the King position will be open for good old Otto again. And good riddance to my bro in the process, because then Harrenhal will be mine. So he digs some prisoners out of a dungeon, cuts out their tongues so that they can't talk about what they're about to do. And the next thing we know, there's a big old bonfire at Harrenhal that leaves quite a few people dead, including, of course, Lionel and Harwin. Allison is horrified when she hears about what happened, but Laris doesn't feel bad at all because obviously, deep down, this is what she wanted him to do. And she'll reward him when the time is right, won't she? Won't she?
All right. So, hot take number 1, birthing babies, birthing babies.
Oh man, here we go again.
Like, at least we get one childbirth scene that ends well in this show, minus Alicent being a huge biatch and demanding to see the baby immediately. Kudos to Rhaenyra. I don't even know if that's the proper way to put that, but just kudos, props, everything to Rhaenyra for trekking across the Red Keep immediately after childbirth. And kudos to the showrunners for showing how absolutely difficult and disgusting her doing that would actually be.
Mm-hmm.
Watching this, and especially the funny thing is, I'm watching it with my partner who has seen a person giving birth, his ex-wife, and as soon as Rhaenyra stands up, he's, saying she's going to go with the baby. He's like, what about the afterbirth? And then immediately there's the afterbirth. I mean, maybe not immediately, but very soon. And, then she's like trudging across the Red Keep and just, ugh. I've never had a baby. So all I can think of is like the worst period cramps of your life, but also you're exhausted and your whole body must be just generally in pain and disgusting from having pushed an entire person out of your vagina. So honestly, 10 out of 10 Targ eyebrows to Rhaenyra for everything that happened at the beginning of this episode, because she was a goddamn champ and I bow to her for that very reason. 0 out of 10 Targ eyebrows to Alicent for even asking that the baby be brought to her immediately. And also, why did they feel they needed to oblige this?
I think, like, talking about the deterioration of their relationship, that really, like, that's such a vindictive thing to do when you've already given birth to how many kids? So you know how it is and you're still making that request. And like you said, they completely, like, I don't know if they've ever had a child, but if they did, I would think that they acted that perfectly.
No, they do not have children. So, like, honestly, I would say this scene alone could qualify them for an Emmy.
Yeah, as somebody who has been on the other end of someone having children, I thought it was very accurate. And yes, as soon as she got up and was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go walk over there," I was like the same thing. I was like, "Nah." I said, "You will in a minute, but not right this second." But yeah, and I thought that the person playing the part was really convincing. Like, really, I mean, it did a great job. Great job. And then Rhaenyra getting up to go walk all the way over there, like that's just classic Rhaenyra. And in my brain, so I'm like, yeah, of course she is. Like, of course. So yeah, that scene was good. It did raise like some eyebrows. How the queen was like, "Oh, I want to see the baby right now." I'm just like, why? So you can kill it? I was like, what are you doing? Like, why all of a sudden? Like, I have to see the child right now.
Well, and I think obviously as you get into the episode, you realized very quickly why she wanted to see the baby immediately, correct? Like, well, and I know, Amanda, you haven't read all of Fire and Blood, but you've read The Princess and the Queen, so you know that Rhaenyra's children were not Laenor's. Obviously, in the books, the Velaryons are also Valyrian. The Velaryons are Valyrian, so they're pale skin, white hair. But in the show, it actually was kind of a little bit weird to me that they focused so much on the brown hair, because I feel like especially later, and I don't want to get into this too much, but especially later when you see what's going on with Daemon and Laena, and they have kids, and their kids look more like Laena than they do like Daemon. Although when Viserys is like, oh, he has his father's nose, and Rhaenyra and Laena are both like, they're cool about this whole thing, right? They're both cool about this whole thing. But
like, I almost wanted like a Eddard Stark, like Joffrey Baratheon, blonde of hair, Robert Baratheon, black of hair. Like,
Yep.
they focus so much on the hair when I'm sitting over here just like, why this baby pure white?
Yeah.
If you've read Fire and Blood or The Princess and the Queen alone, the fact that Rhaenyra had 3 children, 3 sons who had brown hair was always a big deal. And Dean actually asked the question, so is the white hair, the silver hair, passed down through the male line? Well, no, because Rhaegar and Lyanna had Jon. So it's whoever's genes are stronger, I guess. Because Rhaegar also was married to Elia of Dorne, who had dark hair and darker skin, and their kids still had the silver hair. So it's very interesting. My friend Nami is a geneticist, and this is one of those things where we've talked about it a bunch, and I would love to hear her opinions on the fact that only some very few children who are born from a Targ relationship with a non-Targ who has dark hair end up in children with not Targaryen silver hair.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, like I said, just kudos to the showrunners for pulling all the stops on this, right? They show that Rhaenyra is birthing the afterbirth. I don't even know what the right term is because, again, haven't had any kids, thank God. But they show that, and then even after she visits Alicent, she's walking away from the room, and Laenor looks back, and she's leaving a trail of blood behind her.
Yep.
And minus Laenor's, like, we're naming it Joffrey thing, which he didn't, talk to her about at all, obviously. He was super supportive. Like, he tried. He asked the dumb, was it a very painful question? But other than that, I mean, he knows these aren't his kids by blood, and he's still just like, yeah, let's do the thing. And I'm going to support you on this really difficult, honestly, kind of like almost Cersei walk of shame trek across the Red Keep right after you've given birth. Like, I very proud of Laenor in that moment, honestly. Hot take number 2. If Alicent ever had any chill, damn, it is gone now. So, again, she demands to see Rhaenyra's new son immediately. She makes snarky comments about the baby not looking like Laenor. She has no qualms about being super trying with Viserys. I mean, she knows he doesn't want to hear what she's saying, and she pushes and pushes and pushes him until he basically tells her to shut up. And then this is skipping ahead a bit timeline-wise, but the way she talks to her son Aegon when she goes to his room, regardless of the situation she catches him in, it's very good old Otto. It's very like, you're the successor to the throne. I don't care what Rhaenyra or any of her supporters, if they even exist, say. And then they have that small council meeting where she is countering everything Rhaenyra says. But first of all, why was she in the small council meeting? I could probably go on and on and on about this.
Yeah.
But again, if she had any chill, it is gone. I do feel like the 10-year time jump, while what we saw in episode 5, where she is clearly turned her colors, such as it were, green. I do think that the 10-year time jump did a little bit of a disservice to her going from, okay, we're not friends anymore, to this, and a little bit abusive to her son. I don't care how she caught him. Listen, teenagers do what they do. It's a little bit weird that he was standing in a window several stories or more off the ground doing it. But, I don't know if either one of you or on Reddit or Twitter for the memes, but there were a lot of memes. There are a lot of dirty memes. Like,
Oh, I believe it. I believe it.
I give Allison, again, 0 out of 10 target eyebrows for how she treated her son.
Yes.
And also
0 out of 10.
how kind of just like exhausted she seemed with her daughter in their little creepy crawlers conversation. So thoughts on Allison and her switch, I guess, from being just Allison to being, I don't know if we can call her good old Allison. Like, what would you call her? Asshole Allison?
Yeah.
Basically.
Just fucking asshole Allison. That's what I would call her.
I'm wondering what happened, and now, given that I haven't read Fire and Blood, and maybe I'm missing things too, I'm wondering what happened in that 10 years, where it went from like where they were friends, and technically, Rhaenyra didn't even lie to her. Rhaenyra was actually telling the truth.
Thank you. Yes.
On everything, but then we've got Kristen being all dramatic and whatever, anyways. But I don't understand how you go from like you were like this to now you're like this.
I think the one thing with you having not read Fire and Blood is that that's something the show changed. They aged Alicent down and they gave them a friendship that doesn't actually exist. And I think that it's in The Princess and the Queen, it kind of starts at this point of everything, right?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit more backstory in Fire and Blood, but they aged Alicent down in the show and they gave them a relationship that doesn't actually exist in the text, which I have 0 problem with because, again, I think that it makes their enmity make more sense. It makes their absolute like schneh, like, I mean, honestly, like I wrote in the summary, it's two Southern women just being like, bless your heart. Bless your heart.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's definitely some showverse things that have changed their relationship dynamic, which is honestly good, in my opinion. And that's, that's definitely part of how they got from point A to point B. But I still think that what happened in episode 5 and the 10-year time jump does a bit of a disservice to how rude they are to each other.
Yes, very much so.
So Manny,
yeah, I agree. It's the same thing. Like I can kind of see where maybe what they're trying to do, or maybe just the way I'm reading it, maybe I'm just reading it wrong, is I just feel like Allison in the end is just really just jealous of Rhaenyra's freedom. The fact that Rhaenyra can get married and be with someone and be like, look, we're just doing this for show, but we're still gonna like have fun and do what the hell ever we want. And then Allison was kind of dealt a bad hand to where it was like I had to marry like the king, which is fine. I mean, at least the king is not like an asshole, like he's a pretty decent human being. But still, to be like young and marrying this old guy and just mass producing heirs at this point, So I just feel like it's like almost kind of like a jealousy thing where she like wants that. But then from that jealousy, it just kind of like she kind of grows this like judgment over like Rhaenyra, where she's just like, oh, she's probably just looking at her like, oh, she's just a slut fucking sleeping with everybody. And, so yeah. And then, her walking in on this dude like masturbating, that was the best deterrent to get me to never masturbate again. I was like, is that what we look like? Like, oh,
well,
God.
hopefully you don't stand in an open window.
No, never. But that's probably that scene is probably going to pop into a lot of people's heads next time they get lonely, and it's like, you know what? I think I'm just not going to go there anymore.
Because your mom might walk in.
My mom might walk in, My mom would just walk in and just like proclaim Jesus or something over me. She's like, "Oh my God, you sinners," But yeah, that was a little uncomfortable to watch.
Oh, it super was. And I think that that's something that we touched on in episode 5. Actually, our guest Megan brought up was that Allison was raised in Old Town. The faith is very strong in Old Town, right? So she is probably more religious, quote unquote, in a way than a lot of people in Westeros are. And I think that's some of it. I saw a meme earlier today that someone made where it was like, oh, Allison's problem is really just jealousy. It was a picture of Allison and just 4 hideously like Viserys as he gets older and grosser. And then it's Rhaenyra wearing the Olenna, it was me, Cersei glasses, which I know there's another name for them. Whatever. I'm always going to think of them as the Olenna, it was me, Cersei glasses. And it's Rhaenyra with Daemon, Kristen, good old Sir Cole of House Law, and Sir Harwin Strong, also sexy. And then even Laenor, even her husband, super attractive. Like even if he's not, even if they're not doing the thing, which nobody knows they aren't, but I mean they aren't. Like attractive, and poor Allison married the old guy, and he got progressively more disgusting. Like not just older. He looks like Gollum. He looks like the Crypt Keeper. I mean, there are a million different comparisons you could make, but he don't look good.
No, he doesn't look. He's just rotting little by little. He's the bananas that you left out on the table for a week. You know. Oh God.
Like you meant to make banana bread.
Yeah, you always buy the bananas to make the banana bread, but it never happens. It just you have to put it here so it rots, and then I'll throw it away. You know, and buy them again next week.
I was thinking about the jealousy factor because, like, in the same thing, I was like, man, like she's people think she slept with Daemon, which is like a Targaryen thing, anyways. But Matt Smith is gorgeous, and then like everybody else that got listed out, and even maybe so like Alicent never got to have that like, let me go out to the brothels and have some fun, or go out and even for an evening. She was from whenever moment Otto was like, hey, guess what? She's remained like staunchly faithful, which I think you're right on the Old Town thing. So yeah.
It's that jealousy. Yeah, she just she gets to see what freedom looks like from a distance, and I think it just drives her crazy.
Hot take number 3: here be dragons
everywhere.
Seriously, there were a lot of different dragons in this episode. So we got Vermax, a juvenile dragon. And you guys, I loved his little touchdown dance after he burned that sheep. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but for whatever reason, Jace tells him Dracarys, and he burns the sheep, and then he's like up on his little wing tips, and I was like, I love it so much. It was so cute.
It was adorable.
And then we finally get to see Vhagar, and she's huge, and she is ugly in the best way possible. To be honest, the CGI in the scene where she was flying with the windy boy wasn't all that great, but overall, CGI mishness aside, I'm super pleased with how Vhagar looked. Windy boy made his return. I do have to say that Dean, my partner, was like, I don't like that dragon. I don't like how it looks. Why is its neck so long? I hate it. I'm just like, I don't know, man. That's Caraxes. And Aemond, after they present him with the pink dread, who is just a pig in a bullshit faux dragon costume, Aemond goes down into the bowels of the dragon pit, and he stumbles across a fully grown dragon. It looks young-ish, but it's definitely not juvenile. Like, this is a full-grown dragon. And I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck dragon it could be, because there's very few options. It could be Silverwing, which was Good Queen Alicent's dragon, but I highly doubt it based on the coloring. It looked much darker, and I tried watching the episode both on my TV and my computer and like changing the brightness on my computer screen to see if I could figure it out. No, but I don't think it's Silverwing, because Silverwing was, silverish. It could be Vermithor, which was King Jaehaerys's dragon. Again, questionable though, because Vermithor was actually supposed to be tolerant of most people. Like, not to say he would let them ride him, but he wouldn't necessarily immediately go to like, I'm going to burn you to death. So my kind of narrowing it down guess is that it was Syrax, which is Rhaenyra's dragon, which would make thematic sense. That Aemond stumbles down into the dragon pit, and Syrax is like, fuck you, So we got to see that dragon, whichever one it was. Also, honorable mention to the pink dread, aka that poor pig that had to wear that costume. Hopefully,
Yep.
it didn't immediately get burnt alive by some dragon in the dragon pit. Probably it did, though. Also, honorable mention to the egg that Rhaenyra's older kids, Jace and Luke, brought for their new baby brother. Seriously, it
I
was so
thought that was
cute.
cute. That was
It was
cute.
super
Yeah,
cute.
I
They're like,
really like that.
we brought an egg for our brother. We love our brother. We brought him an egg. To be honest, also, it puts into question the whole situation where, which we'll get into in a minute, where the boys play a prank on Aemon because he doesn't have a dragon yet, because it seems like these brothers are very close, whereas Aegon and Aemon, they don't care about each other. I'm pretty sure that Aegon thinks Aemon is a little bitch. It's very cute that they went and found a dragon egg and brought it back immediately after their baby brother was born.
So I've seen a meme over like I think it's like the last week, maybe 2 weeks, where it showed like the different sizes of the dragons, and it had like Drogon for like this is how Drogon size, but then all the dragons from this series with like Balerion on the top, and like just like how they would look if they were next to each other. And like Vagar, I was so impressed. And like I know we have our issues with CGI. I try to let myself like suspend the. I do it with Star Wars too. I have to let myself like suspend the disbelief and just enjoy the ride and enjoy it. And I love seeing her get on screen.
So I have thoughts on this. The fact that you're seeing so many dragons, I think is really cool, and I think that it's cool that like you're seeing all these different things, right? But there's another part of me that's like doesn't like it, right? And the reason I don't is because like the same thing with like I guess the other way I can kind of like use something else that kind of bothered me was with Star Trek, right? I was always a big fan of it, huge, right? Every time there was like a ship battle scene, it was something that was suspenseful, intense, and kind of rare. So when it happened, it was like a big deal. And then when they started doing all these wars and there was explosions all the time, it was almost like the cat was out of the bag at this point. Nothing else is going to like excite me, right? So the fact that I see like dragons everywhere now, it's like because like back in the day when the mother of dragons cracked those eggs and those dragons came out and then they just got older and they started just pouncing and like going crazy. Like that was the first time I saw anything like that. So it was like, holy shit, like these things are fucking crazy. And then now it's like, oh no, man, everyone's got a fucking dragon, shit. I got mine in the trunk right now, like everybody's got one. So it's almost like it's like the man behind the curtain thing, it's just kind of like, oh, here it's just everyone's got one. So it's, and when everyone has one, there's nothing really special about it anymore, you know? So, but again, I'll put that on the lower side of the scale than actually getting, like, I do like getting to see them, and I like getting to see the different types of them and what their roles are and all this stuff and just how they interact. So I do appreciate that more. The other side of my thoughts is more just kind of nitpicky, where it's like, well, because the thing is that I feel like the show is doing such a good job with saying a lot with so little, that the fact that they have all these dragons and that they're doing all this stuff doesn't take away from like the context of what they're trying to do. Where I'm like, okay, you know what? So this is where it actually works. It's not like they're trying to like wow us with all the dragons. Like, hey, look at all these dragons. Don't you love this show? Like they're not doing that. So the fact that there's so many dragons is kind of like balanced out for me to where I'm like, you know what? Like it's okay because of what they're doing with the rest of the show. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of okay with it. And the dragon that was in the cavern, I don't know what dragon that was, but I can tell you one thing: it's his dragon. That's it. I saw him go down there, and I was like, oh, okay. This is foreshadowing a little bit. That's gonna be your dragon, isn't it?
Hot take number 4: Harwin Strong wins Best Baby Daddy of the Year. It's an award we're giving now. This hot take isn't just all about Harwin. It's about several things. I like that they didn't show anything specific between him and Rhaenyra. I do think there's a little bit missed in that the only 2 times we saw them together was when Rhaenyra was out with Daemon and Harwin was the City Watch person who stopped her and was like, all right, go have your fun. Just be careful next time. And then in the last episode, he was the one that rushed out into the crowd to pull her away from the drama. But I still do like that they didn't show anything specific between him and Rhaenyra. Like, we didn't have to have some sex scene or whatever, but we did see that they clearly care about each other and have affection for each other, and we didn't need like a sex scene to show that. And then he's just hanging out with his kids all the time, even though he can't actually claim them. He wants to hold the new baby, hard eyes, and he sticks up for Jace specifically when fucking Sir Cole of House Slaw was being the absolute worst. And then he's like, RIP, gone too soon as well.
Oh, I loved him. Really loved him. On the gone too soon as well, I'm sure that goes back to last episode and that freaking awesome Lady of the Vale, because I needed more of her, and then we lost her, and I'm very upset about that. Regardless, same situation here. Like, I really wanted to see more of his story, but I also kind of knew, like, even without reading Fire and Blood, I'm that one who will still pop over to like the wikis and okay, oh yeah, that's who that person is, blah blah blah, because I used to do it while watching and reading through both books, all the books and stuff for Game of Thrones. So I thought he was great, and I really hate that sometimes I want them to stray away from the story and then they don't, and then it's like, god damn it.
Okay, so I have thoughts on this one. Again, here's how the show does it, right? They take these characters, like the Lady in the Veil, where they show her for 5 minutes, and you know everything you need to know about that character in that very short scene. Great. That's just good writing, you know? And his character, I already knew, okay, this guy's the dad. I can tell the way he was playing with the other kids, training them and like doing all this kind of stuff. Everything I needed to know about that character. And then literally, like smoke, he's just there and then just gone. And I'm like, look, the guy writing this, or the girl, or whoever's writing this show, like knows what they're doing with this. And a matter of fact, I'm almost kind of getting the feeling now that when I understand a character within 2 minutes on this show, I know the next scene they're going away. It's like I already know. It's like when I was watching Game of Thrones, right? It's like they always set up who is going to get killed drastically just because of how like bad they were towards the end. You know, when they had like Ramsay and all these people, I'm like, oh, well, let me guess. I'm willing to bet his dogs are going to eat him. And it's like, oh, look, that happened. That writing was not as good as I feel like what this writing is doing, where it's like, but it is almost a little bit predictable, but they do it so well where I need to know about these characters was literally just from the way that they're presenting themselves and everything. I love the fact that Rhaenyra didn't have to say, hey, do you remember when we had at least sex 4 times and had all these children? No, like you just knew, right? You just saw the way they looked at each other, like, okay, yeah, okay, I get it. He's the dad. It was awesome. Good writing, man. That's all I'm gonna say. Good writing. 10 out of 10 Target eyebrows.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep, 10 out of 10 Target eyebrows for Harwin Strong.
Good daddy.
And speaking of him being a good daddy, there's a lot of kids happening in this episode, and this combines the Here Be Dragons and Harwin Strong being baby daddy of the year, because there are a lot of dragons in the Targaryen children's sons too, and that is hot take number 5. Now, to me, it was very interesting that in the Dragon Pit, it seemed as if Aegon, Jace, and Luke were getting along as they picked on Aemond. I'm not saying it's good or proper, but it seemed like these 3 were friends, and they were picking on the annoying kid who doesn't have a dragon of his own. Like Luke, I think, doesn't either, maybe, or if he does, we don't see it at this point. But then in the yard later, which is after Aegon had his conversation with Alicent, Aegon and Jace were going at it. And was that merely because of Aegon's conversation with Alicent? But also probably not. Like, it was probably also Sir Cole of House Slaw egging on their fight as well. It was a little bit of an abrupt change to me, to be honest, that Aegon was playing pranks with them in one scene, and then like 10, 15, 20 minutes later, he's going at it with Jace. I do think it's a combination of his conversation with Alicent and Kristen Cole just being a total asshole, like red pillar piece of shit. She didn't want me, so. But beyond that, like, kind of abrupt change, they definitely showed that that's gonna be an issue because they're already fighting, and it doesn't matter that Rhaenyra took her kids away from there, probably. Like, it's still gonna be, now Aegon believes that he is the successor, I guess. The writing for that whole scenario is a little bit off to me. I also think they had a very interesting take on Helena in Fire and Blood. She's described as a really sweet kid. She's a little heavier set. How dare eye roll. And not as attractive, again, how dare eye roll, as most Targaryens would be. And that's kind of like the bad things that are said about her, but she's said to be like a really sweet person. They know from the start she's going to be a good mom, which is weird because I think they're saying this about her when she's like 12 or something.
Ugh.
But it was an interesting take on Helena that she's super into creepy crawlers. It's like, if this girl lived in the 90s, she would be me and have a creeper crawler oven. Fuck the Easy Bake Man, give me my creepy crawler oven. And that's how I see Helena. All of these kids, because God, there's so fucking many of them now. They're friends, and then they're not friends, and then there's Helena, who apparently they're gonna try to marry to Jace, probably not, based on Alicent's reaction over her dead body. Lots going on there.
The thing I took away from the thing in the yard was that because Viserys was sitting up there and Lionel was up on the thing too with him, I think Aegon was like doing the teenage boy thing of like trying to show off too. Yeah. And maybe that conversation with his mom, like maybe that had a part to play in it. But I really think he was like, because it reminded me of like the scenes in the yard at like Winterfell when it was like Jon and all those, and Rob and all those guys trying to show off.
Friendly.
Yeah. So like, and then of course it doesn't help when you've got like an adult like Kristen who's like, oh, just keep beating on the smaller kid, blah 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 blah, because he's already like feeling like his ego might be bruised, so now he's gonna take it out on the other kid.
What an asshole. God damn. We just go from the hot guy people were interested in to being like a total asshole.
Sounds like, you know, like all of our dating lives here as we go. As for the other kids, tell like they're already trying to move their pieces and get everybody into the chessboard and playing the Game of Thrones. I was really disappointed that like I was surprised to see that they got along so well, the other kids, and then all of a sudden like that one conversation, that one thing in the yard is what's going to drive them apart when like they've all grown up together. That seems just so weird. And like thinking about the comparison to like Jon and Rob, who were still really close, even though there was so much like animosity even at Winterfell. So I was thinking about those kind of things going into play as well.
Yeah, Kristen is a big asshole. I kind of like had like some admiration for him when he would just like confessed and he was just willing to like accept his fate. And then when he went to go like kill himself, I'm like, bro, you should have just went ahead and finished. You know, like just done it. You know, like you're just kind of an asshole. Like I don't really have any respect for you and like the way they were with these kids. And look, kids are gonna be kids, right? Like they're gonna do that. They're gonna try to impress and like whatever. We all know who the problem child is gonna fucking be at this point, you know? With these kids. So it's like, okay, look, you know, maybe he's the one who needs a little more guidance. And yeah, and if I was walking into that like shit show and I saw all these kids, I'd be like, man, you kids are all gonna sleep with each other, marry each other. Like this is like a fucking mess. I'm going back to the wall. Like I don't want anything to do with this, whatever is gonna happen here, you know. Like I'm done.
I am curious, as somebody who hasn't read the books, who do you think is the most problematic child though?
Aegon. So far.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Aegon. Now I'm well aware that I could be wrong about that. I know these writers are good, that I'm just saying that like they could be subverting like my expectations right now, where they're guiding me somewhere.
And I think the reason I was questioning that is because not Jason, Luke, right? They're fine. And Joffrey is a little baby, and Helena just wants to cook up some creepy crawlers in her machine, right? So for me, it's like, was it Aegon because he's jerking off in the window, or was it Aemond because they all actually actively hate him? Even his own older brother is like, ugh, this kid, until his mom is like, be nice to your brother. And he also doesn't have a dragon. So that was the only reason I was curious.
I feel like it's going to be one of those two, right? Because the one who doesn't have a dragon. So in that scene, I'm like, okay, Aemon is going to be the one who is damaged and brutalized. This dragon down there, who will be his dragon at some point, maybe. Like, he's going to take it, and then he's just going to wreak fucking havoc, right? Because like any kid that gets picked on consistently, you know, like they're just going to fucking go ape shit and just start fucking. So it could be that we're like, okay, Aegon is clearly a character that is almost coming off like a Daemon character. So they're kind of like leading you to believe like, oh, look, he's just like Daemon, and Daemon's a problem. While in the background, they're just doing a sleight of hand is what they're doing. And they're like, wait a minute, you know, and then they're going to bring one of these up. Because the other two kids, whatever, they're like, fine, they're just normal, like whatever the heck. But they definitely have between these two. So I feel like it's going to be one of those as the problem child. I feel like with Aegon, I feel like that's where the show is trying to direct me. And from them trying to direct me to do that, I'm like, no. Your writers are smart on this show. So it may be this other kid. And maybe Aegon is going to be good, right? Like maybe he'll be like, wait a minute, we can't do crazy shit like this, you know? So
well, I mean, and also to be fair, I was picked on a fuck ton as a kid. Me being picked on and made fun of a whole shit ton when I was a kid made me into somebody who is far more accepting and welcoming of a person than I think I would have been otherwise. So it could go either way with Aemond, right? But with Aegon, yes, it is kind of, Jesus Christ, dude. I think the thing that concerns me is like, is that the way you need to get off? Like you have to be in an open window, like risking your life. What if you reach climax and fall out the window? Like
that's not the way to go.
It's like extreme voyeurism. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
First I thought like when they were panning in the window, I was like, is this a Daemon scene? But then like they spanned up and I went, oh no, this isn't Daemon. Like, who is this?
It's a child.
Aegon, when you're 55, you can do this. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're at that age where there's no excitement anymore, but like to do this out of the starting gates, bro. Like you're messing it up for yourself, you know, man. Like don't.
Well, and their fight in the courtyard where Sir Cole of Houselaw is just so clearly favoring Alicent's children and egging them into having this one-on-one with each other. Aegon, who is much older, bigger, etc., and Jace. And Jace holds his own for a bit, but then he hasn't been trained as well, clearly, because Kristen Cole is a piece of shit.
Yep.
And is supposed to be training all of them, but isn't. And Jace gets kind of knocked down, and Kristen is basically like, finish him. And then Harwin comes in and saves the day, but he puts hands on Aegon, and Aegon's like, oh my God, I'm the blood of the king. How dare you touch me? And Kristen comes in also just kind of talking shit, bringing up the parentage of these kids. Like you wouldn't do this if it was just a kid. Like it's that you do it for a cousin or a nephew or maybe a son. And that is what leads to Lionel is like, you disgrace the family name by laying hands on the prince and by fighting a member of the Kingsguard. And then Lionel, he wants to give up his position as Hand of the King because his son disgraced the family name. And Viserys is like, no, you can't just leave being Hand of the King. You're still my hand. I don't care what your son did, whatever. Lionel also won't tell him the exact reasons why he feels this way. And so Viserys is like, no, you're not Hand of the King. But yeah, sure, you can take your son back to Harrenhal to like claim his seat, whatever. And Viserys agreeing to that leads into, the curse of Harrenhal. So in Fire and Blood, there's a huge fire at Harrenhal, and let's say that it's talked about as if it was a mistake, but there's quite a few people who are sure that it was on purpose. And now we have at least showverse confirmation that Larys, the younger son, hired the prisoners who did the deed, aka burning Harrenhal and killing Lionel and Harwin Strong. So this hot take number 6 is a lot about Larys, I guess, but also a little about the fact that what happened in the yard, that fight, directly led to Lionel bringing his son back to Harrenhal to take over his seat or whatever. And because they were both there, Larys, I guess, really the little finger of this season.
All those vibes.
Yeah, was able to rid himself of his older brother and therefore make him heir of Harrenhal. And also, I mean, in a way, he unwittingly helped Rhaenyra a little bit there, in that now there is no actual father. Like, there's no way to prove any sort of parentage by Harwin admitting something. But his real goal was apparently to get rid of his father. In his words, that was his real goal. We all know that he was also trying to get rid of his brother so that he could then be Lord of Harrenhal. But he got rid of his father because Alicent suggested it to him. And I'm saying suggested it in that way because it's nonsense. Obviously, Alicent did not want this.
I immediately got Littlefinger vibes off of Larys when he first popped up. I was like, oh, this is the dude. I want to know what got him to that point. What made him so hateful against his dad and his brother, other than being like second son?
In the book, his loyalties and goals were always in question. Let's say he is not necessarily absolutely loyal to Alicent and her lineage. I think a lot of it probably had to do that he was the younger son. He was deformed. And so people didn't give him the attention or whatever that he felt that he deserved. And he was very manipulative. He didn't really have any friends. So as much as it seems like he's aligned with Alicent and her children, it could have mostly just been, fuck you, bro, I want Harrenhal. I think what the show is telling us at this point is he will do literally anything to advance his position. Yeah. And him making sure his father specifically is dead is very important for Alicent, because she straight up told him, if my father was Han, and he was like, yeah, but he wouldn't be impartial. And she says, but he would be partial to me. And she's the queen, and he knows that there's a very good chance, as we all know, honestly, based on Westerosi patriarchy, that Aegon, her son, is going to be put forward as an heir. No matter what happens to Viserys, no matter what Viserys has said, no matter what Rhaenyra has done, even if Rhaenyra had had true-born sons with her husband, Laenor, I don't think that would have mattered. The Westerosi patriarchy was always going to needle their way in as being behind Aegon II. Not all of them, but it's going to happen. I think that's something that they have very much driven home in this season, every single episode. So for Larys, it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to make sure that my dad is dead so that you, Alicent, can have your dad, good old Otto, back. And now it's got this fight between like good old Gossip Otto and good old, I don't even know if I call him Gossip Larys. There's no alliteration there, so I need to come up with a better name for Larys, but good old Littlefinger Larys over here.
And how
Yeah.
often do they do these dinners where he was just waiting for her spread of food, was already eating, drinking his wine, hanging out like he lives there?
Yep.
They're BFFs, man. I'll give Allison this. She doesn't really have many friends. I mean, she lost Rhaenyra as a friend, and Kristen Cole is her bodyguard, basically, and her husband is a literal rotting corpse. Not that I think there's any sort of attraction or anything untoward going on with her and Laris, but I absolutely think it's like, ugh, this is the guy I'm friends with.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm just waiting for Laris to die. Just like I did for Littlefinger the entire time on that show. Every time he popped up, I was like, this guy's just a snake, and I can't wait to watch him die. You know, he was one of those people that I was just like, he's going to die one day on this show, and I'm going to be there to see it. You know, so it was a rewarding scene when he got killed. You know, so I'm just kind of hoping for that same replay for me on this one. So I'm definitely vested in his character, but really just vested in his death. So
I hate to say this, but even show Littlefinger seemed to have more connections and was smarter about how he went about things. And I cannot believe I'm saying this because show Littlefinger compared to book Littlefinger, just FYI for somebody who hasn't read the books, book Littlefinger was always working in the shadows, right? Now, he did put that dagger to Ned Stark's throat in a Game of Thrones, but he was way less obvious. Like, he wasn't going around talking to Varys about his, like, nefarious plans. So, to me, I feel like, well, and also, I guess, in Fire and Blood, Larys is the same way. He's a shadow character, right? He's there, and he causes problems, but there's no confirmation that he actually did anything. So for him in the showverse to be the person who very obviously hired these prisoners, cut out their tongues so that they couldn't talk about what they were about to do, because we're, I guess, supposed to assume that they can't read or write. And then they go to Harrenhal and burn Harrenhal and kill a fuck ton of, well, I guess we didn't really see any people dead, but we have to assume people died because they were like burned horses. Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
Ugh. Speaking of burning things alive, hot take number 7. Lena deserved better.
Yep.
Seriously.
Yes, she did.
Yep.
She deserved better than Daemon. She deserved better than dying so young and due to childbirth at that.
Yep.
I will say one of the funny things after the earlier childbirth scene where Rhaenyra actually gives birth to the baby and everything is good and healthy, and despite her travails after that, you know, everything is fine. Dean was like, why is there so much childbirth in this episode? And I was like, because that's where they are in their lives. Honestly, it's like my Facebook newsfeed circa 2012.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's all your
Yep.
friends just giving birth. But at least she got to go out somewhat on her own terms. Everything about that scene was so sad and awful and sad, though. Vagar eventually obeyed, but was confused and maybe didn't want to do the thing at first. And I'm just crying in Dragon. I did see a meme where it was Lena and like a cat, and it was like Dracarys, and then the cat's crying, very big teary eyes.
Aww.
And then it's Lena, Dracarys, and the cat is crying fire. And I was just like, yes, because dragons are cats, not dogs. Let's be very clear. Or horses, even. What I would like to hear is y'all's thoughts on Daemon's reaction when they said they could cut the baby out of her, because he asked, well, would it kill her? And they said yes. And he actually didn't seem to be okay with that. And I gotta be honest, I feel like Daemon is a lot of things, but I wasn't necessarily expecting that. I don't know.
I was actually curious on for one on Daemon. I wasn't necessarily unsurprised to see him be like that, because it seemed like they actually had a pretty good rapport. Even if maybe they weren't in love with each other, they definitely cared about each other. It didn't seem like they hid anything from each other. I'm trying to remember if there was ever a time, whether in Game of Thrones or I don't think it happened here, where Why are they immediately going to C-section and not trying to like spin a baby around from breech if they're not coming out? I watched too much Call to the Midwife or Call the Midwife, where they either spin them around or they birth them feet first or they do the whole thing. But the Maesters don't know any of this. Like, is it just because they're dudes? Like, do they need some women in the order? Is this what's happening? Like,
They don't have ultrasounds,
yeah.
right? So they only knew the baby was breech when it was already so long into the birth, and that's understandable.
So Call the Midwife takes place around 1950s, 1960s, and like most of these, there's like no ultrasound like available at that point, and they're still turning the babies or birthing them. Like obviously, fantasy versus reality and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the scientist in me is like, you guys like know that these things are possible and that it has happened. So I actually wasn't surprised about him not wanting her to die. Like in comparison to Viserys, you would think that Viserys would be the one that would be like, let's save my wife. And then you would think Daemon would be the crueler one on that, but it was literally the complete opposite.
Good writing.
And then, yeah, exactly. And then his reaction where like he was trying to get out to where Lena was going to Vhagar. You could tell he was like, I'm too late. I got there too late. Seemed to me like he was trying to stop her from doing what he knew she was going to do.
I did also hear that there was a cut scene where he's like comforting his daughters, but all we got was like them standing on the parapets, and he's like, I don't know what to do with you two.
I really think that there's something very beautiful in like, allowing your significant other to have a glorious death in their own terms as opposed to like something else. And I do love the fact that they really made him the opposite of Viserys in the sense to where it was like him having an heir is not important. Daemon is just chaos. You know what I'm saying? He's just straight up chaos. And he's like, you know what? Like the way I talk it, he's like, no, fuck whatever. I'll make another fucking heir. Like, I don't fucking care, right? Like
he might be evil chaotic, but he's still chaotic.
He's still chaotic, exactly. But he's just like, no, like have your fucking death, like die how you want or whatever. I don't think he wanted her to die either, but he definitely didn't want her to suffer by getting cut open. And not to like count that against Viserys. I think Viserys was trying to do the noble thing and produce the heir like he is supposed to do. He was like moved by his duty of like, oh, I need to produce an heir, so it's very important that even though this is going to happen, I mean, it has to happen. But like, honestly, if that was my girl on that bed and they asked me, you're going to cut her open, I'm like, look, no, I'd rather them both die together and then die in suffering and pain like that. So this is a part with like Daemon, like I very reluctantly connected with him on this, to where I was like, you know what, dude, yeah, let her have her own death. And that's it. And yeah, the dragon having to breathe fire, I mean, that sucks. That dragon was not into that. And it was sad. Like, I imagine me turning over to my big fat kitten and being like, look, you got to kill me now. Like all those times you tried to bite me, you need to do it for real now, So that was a really cool scene though. And I really did like it. And just the aspect of Daemon not getting the C-section, because that's what I would have expected from him, to where it's like, oh yeah, I don't care about, the woman's disposable. I just want the baby. Again, the writing just surprised me, where I was like, wow, this is good.
In Fire and Blood, Lena just simply dies in childbirth, gives birth to a stillborn son and dies in childbirth. So this was, honestly, it was a relief that wasn't what they did with her in the show, that she wanted to die as a dragon rider. And also, again, that everything with Vhagar, and she's like, Dracarys, like over and over again, and Vhagar's just like, but mom, why?
Well, the thing that needs to be mentioned too is that the Targaryens have such a bond with their dragons too. So we saw it with Drogon and Daenerys and the connections that they have to their dragons. So where like Vhagar is being a dragon, she can probably smell all the blood. She can smell what's happening. She can smell that death is she's imminent. On the doorstep. It's coming. But she still finally obeys and listens, but that leaves the doorway for someone else to bond with her.
It wasn't what I was expecting. I guess for me, I didn't expect it to happen in this episode, that Lena would be in the process of giving birth and die, but because it did and the way it happened, kudos to the writers, because that was
Yeah.
way more impactful than a simple her just giving birth to a stillborn and dying in birth would have been. And still, again, we come full circle to what happened in episode 1, where they are trying so hard to show the dangers of childbirth, particularly in the world that we are living in, the country that we're living in right now.
Mhm.
Kudos. I mean, granted, we don't have dragons to Dracarys us to death if we get to that point, but everything about the childbirth scenes in this episode was, again, just A++.
Yeah.
I have zero complaints.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's all done really well, and it's all very, very believable, and I absolutely love it. And I do like the fact that they did Lena like this and not just like dying with like a stillborn child. I think that would have maybe been a little bit much, because people actually experience that in real life, So I think it's one of those things where it's like, it might be a bit much for some people, but I think it did great. And then with the dynamic with like Damon in there, it's like they're really writing this guy as an extremely dynamic character. This is like the kind of writing that literally almost killed me mentally since like when I was watching like Battlestar Galactica. When I watched Battlestar Galactica, it was that
we
kind
are
of
all
writing.
PSG fans in here.
Yeah.
So it's like it was like that, because that show like I lived for. Like I didn't care what happened to me after the show ended. I just needed to watch the entire thing first.
Mhm.
And the writing was so dynamic and what was going on with these characters and the way they changed. And you're just like, oh my God, awesome. So this scene with like Damon and he's like, no, not going to cut her open and just let her have her own death. Like there was something that's like, you know what, dude, like you're chaotic, but tonight we're like on the same side. Like I get that. It's just good writing, man. It's just good fucking writing, dude.
Yeah. I still think Lena deserved better than
She deserves so
Damon.
much better.
She absolutely deserved better. I 100% agree with that. But if she was gonna go, she went. I mean, you got to look at it. She went to Dragon Rider's death. Look, I think in that world, there's not much more for someone like her like to ask for. Like I think that was good for her. It sucks, but it was good.
So I think it's time for our favorites roundup.
So number one is that death scene and with Damon, and the fact that it was just like the opposite of what Viserys did, because I've always liked Viserys like from the beginning, and I still do, because I'm just like, look, okay, he is a noble guy.
He tries so hard.
He tries really hard, and I feel like even with his wife dying, like he was just trying to do the noble thing where it's like, no, I need to produce an heir, blah, 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 like whatever. Like in the end, but I feel like he definitely allows his duty to kind of go more. And the fact that he was still backing up Rhaenyra as the actual heir to the throne, right? Like he wasn't backing down from it. He wasn't doing like what any of these other people would have done. So it's like, look, he's like a noble guy, like, is he the smartest? No. Like, does he probably need to be on the throne? No. But at least he's like fucking trying. I don't know. It was like that opposite there, and I just felt like it was fucking great. And I did like the scene with like the kids training and stuff like that, and Sir Cole showing himself to be a complete asshole. So that whole scene there, and then another one is when they introduced the baby daddy, and literally within the first 2 minutes, I already knew who he was and that he was a good person.
I liked Lena's death scene, of course, but I also appreciated how much they humanized Damon there, because I don't know if I disagree on that. Well, she obviously deserved better, but I think that he seemed like he was pretty even keel when we saw him before this, and we know how cruel this universe can get. So I think of who she could have had compared to who she did get, I think it worked out in her favor. Vagar, all the way around, it's going to just still go into that, just seeing her finally on screen. Like the cute little like pug or French bulldog with the scraggly teeth.
Gosh, for me, I think it's got to be Rhaenyra marching across the Red Keep straight after giving birth. As somebody who has never had a kid, never wanted to have a kid, never wants to have a kid. God help me, no, please, never. I respected so much about what the show did in those scenes, and also just bow to you, my queen, Rhaenyra, for doing that, for fighting through that pain and discomfort isn't even the word. As somebody who's never gone through it, I'm not stupid. I know this is beyond discomfort. This is pain. This is
earth-shattering pain.
It's like disgusting too, right? I'm sorry, but it is.
Yeah.
Everybody says birth is beautiful, but it's also fucking disgusting. Everything she did and the way they portrayed that. How the hell could she have done that? But then it's not the first time somebody has. I mean, shit, there was actually a meme I saw earlier today where Kate Middleton had to, and listen, I don't get me started on the English monarchy and how disgusting it is, but Kate Middleton had to like bring one of their kids out, or maybe all of them out, like hours after she had given birth.
Yes.
Ready for pictures with a babe in arms. It's something that I guess still happens disgustingly today. So kudos to Rhaenyra for going through that. Kudos to the show for showing how absolutely disgusting it would be.
Yep.
As we close out this episode, we just want to give a shout out to our Heroes Tier patron, Tommy of the TKOK Podcast Network. Thank you so much for supporting us. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for Hot Tea Takes. Manny and I will be back next week with a new guest to cover House of the Dragon's 7th episode, Driftmark.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Saga Podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out other Geek Saga entertainment endeavors, including the Sagas and Sass webcast and podcast and Ice and Fire Con.